Let's talk to Reagan Reese about that. She's the White House correspondent for the Daily Caller. She's been digging in on the answers to these questions. Reagan, good to have you with us.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so if President Trump is able to pull this off again, how does the left react? What do we know?
Yeah. Well, it's actually perfect because I just read a piece in the Washington Post where they just spoke to some Harris and Trump supporters, and they admit that the Harris supporters that they spoke to, had more extreme reactions on what they would do if Trump wins this election, which I think pairs perfectly with our reporting this morning that talks to a variety of political experts about, what could happen if Trump wins. And that touches on protests, lawfare. What's his Secret Service going to have to look like? What's the media meltdown going to be? In terms of protests, which I think is something that a lot of people are concerned about, the guys we spoke to really believe that it's going to be more dangerous and more extreme in 2024 if Trump wins compared to 2016. I think their reasoning is quite perfect. In 2016, they argued that Americans were not ready for a Trump win. They did not expect it to happen. And so, there were protests, but not as widespread as you would see in 2024, where it's a very real possibility that Donald Trump could be in the White House again. Not to mention, the country's been steeped in anti-Trumpism for the last 8 years. The media has claimed that this guy is Hitler, he's fascist, he's a threat to democracy. And all of that has kind of made this really charged political environment going into 2024. And so, for that reason, most prominently, the experts we spoke to are really expecting a super extreme reaction if Trump wins on November 5th.
Right. So we've seen 2 assassination attempts that we're aware of this year on President Trump already during this campaign. You mentioned what the Secret Service posture. One has to wonder, should he become president-elect again, are they going to change anything? Are they going to up the ante in terms of the types of robust protection you would have to give a guy who's under such constant threat like Donald Trump?
Yeah, I spoke to a couple Secret Service agents about this, and I found my interviews with them quite fascinating because, I kept asking them, okay, what would be different? How would you up this guy's security? Because he already has a detail that's very similar to what a sitting president has now after these past 2 assassination attempts. And they really said to me, Reagan, we'd love to be having those conversations about how you can up this. But the problem is that the Secret Service isn't even there yet. They are, lacking in manpower. They're lacking in competence. They're 10 years behind on where they should be technologically. There's concerns about them even being able to work a drone. That's something that I'm pretty sure my brother was able to do when he was 13 years old, and they're still reading handbooks and have 30 minutes of training at certain rallies while protecting the president. And So I think that's quite alarming that, they can't even be in a position to discuss how you would beef up the president's detail because they don't even think that's a conversation that could be had right now.
Amazing. In other words, like if this needs help, Congress should do this on an emergency basis right now. They should be handling that very question in saying, how do we tackle this and how do we get him the protection he needs? It's so critical, and the threats are very real. The riots, we've seen riots a lot from the left. When they disagree with something politically, they take it way too far, way too often, whether it's threatening Supreme Court justices, if it's burning American cities, it's killing cops and civilians, if whatever it might be. Of course, also the Trump 2017 inauguration, as you detail in your reporting this morning, remind people of, was racked with all sorts of left-wing violence, the burning and destruction in Washington, D.C. as President Trump took the oath of office. What do we expect now?
Yeah, the limo that was, famously torched on Trump's inauguration was actually, I looked it up when I was doing my reporting, just a couple blocks from where I live now, which is a very nice and safe area on Capitol Hill.
Yes.
And that limo just got done dropping off guests at the inauguration, and moments later it's torched and the limo driver is fleeing. That is absolutely mind-boggling.
Literally in front of the Washington Post building, by the way. It was parked on the
Yeah,
curb of the Washington Post building. That is the most easy access story you could possibly imagine.
yeah, unbelievable. But one thing that the experts that we spoke to really pointed out is that, again, like I said, because people are more prepared now for a Trump victory, and that they've been steeped in this anti-Trumpism for the last 8 years, they expect this to be more widespread than just your Washington, D.C., your New York City, your Chicago, your Minneapolis. They expect a lot of people in these pockets throughout the country to riot against whatever symbol of government they might see in their towns, in their cities, just because of, again, this preparation, this fact that now a Trump victory seems very real. And I think especially with, I dare I say, vibes right now,
Yeah.
it does feel like the election is trending that way to a Trump victory.
Yeah, we'll see. I like being optimistic, but I also like being cautious because I don't want to be so let down. But there's like almost no Democrats who are trying to bring the temperature down on this, Reagan, and try and get their own base to settle the hell down. In fact, the only one I can even think of is New York City Mayor Eric Adams, who the establishment has turned against completely. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris are trying to destroy this guy. He was asked yesterday, do you believe that President Trump is a fascist? Here's Eric Adams saying no, and everybody needs to settle down.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. I wondered if I could ask you about any communications you've been having with the Trump campaign about this rally or otherwise, and if you believe, as others have said, that the former president is a fascist.
I have been had those terms hurled at me by some political leaders in the city. Using terms like Hitler and fascist. My answer is no. I know what Hitler has done, and I know what a fascist regime looks like. I think, as I've called over and over again, that the level of conversation, I think we could all dial down the temperature. And I've heard people say that the former president should not be able to have a rally in Madison Square Garden. I strongly disagree. This is America. This is New York. And I think it's important that we allow individuals to exercise their right to get their message clear to New Yorkers. And our job as a city and as a police department is to make sure they could do that in a peaceful way.
All right, so there you hear Eric Adams say, look, we just need to dial down the temperature here. We can't be calling Trump a fascist. That's ridiculous. Have you heard other Democrats say that?
Wow, I just listened to that clip and I'm like, wow, Vice President Kamala Harris is the hardest hit there. In my piece, in my reporting, we touch on Congressman talking about which I think plays into this, talking about how if the election is not fair and secure, that he's not sure if he's going to certify the election.
Sorry, you broke up when you said his name. I think you meant Jamie Raskin. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
good.
In my piece, which I think plays into this, he talked about how he wouldn't, he's unsure if he would certify the election if he felt like it wasn't fair and secure. And I think that plays into the same kind of dangerous rhetoric of calling Trump this fascist and this threat to democracy. I think that elevates the temperature because it kind of lays the groundwork that I, again, spoke to these experts about for, widespread unrest across the country. And so, it's really hard to think of examples of other Democrats who are looking to turn the temperature down. And, if you're looking for some Democrats to do that, the first place to look is not the White House.
No, they're not doing that at all. In fact, in the wake of these assassination attempts, they've offered some sort of mealy-mouthed statements on the subject and then instantly went back to demonizing Trump in some of the most vile possible ways. This includes this past week and the DNC projecting messages about Trump and Hitler onto the side of Madison Square Garden last night. What they're doing right now is escalating all of this rhetoric to assassination attempt levels. And you're saying these people are not trying to bring stability to the country. And so you've kind of run down the list here, Reagan. You talk about the concern about rioting. I know a lot of people are concerned about that, about the efforts by people like Jamie Raskin to say we're not even going to let him become president if the people decide that they prefer him. What about the legal battles that are likely to ensue in the wake of the election, especially if Trump wins and the left wants to make claims that it was stolen? What are we expecting there?
Yeah. One thing that is important to note in all of this when we talk about election integrity, I've heard this from Trump allies. I've heard this from the Trump campaign themselves. And I've done a lot of reporting on this, so I tend to believe them that what happened in 2020 on the election integrity front is not going to happen again in 2024, that the RNC is far more beefed up and prepared this time in 2024. And I think that's an accurate assessment of the situation. But still, our experts are really expecting to see, lawsuits on the basis of voter suppression. And so, that's something that the Democrats have leaned heavily on over the past couple of years. And so what that can look like is challenging places where there is voter ID requirements that might, what the Democrats say, they say that turns away people from voting, or in situations that we're already seeing with the DOJ suing Virginia and Alabama over the purging of their voter rolls. Those were situations that were pointed out to me that you can kind of see the preparation, the groundwork for Democrats to claim voter suppression in the 2024 election.
So they're already gearing up to claim that the election was fraudulent, making scurrilous claims of voter suppression in an environment where in places like Georgia, which Joe Biden said was Jim Crow 2.0, makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle. You have black turnout at record levels now over the course of subsequent elections. ID cards widely preferred. There was a survey done this past week. Corey, where was that? Do you remember that survey? There was an a survey done this past week. I think it was Gallup asking people, do they think we need IDs for elections? It was like 86% support. It was massive, massive across races, genders, ages. Everybody supports it because it's common sense. So the left is gearing up to claim that votes were suppressed, and that's how Trump won.
Yep, that's exactly it. And yeah, on the point where voter ID actually kind of helps turnout, it makes people, a lot of these things help people feel more secure in the election process. That plays right into key demographics that Republicans are trying to turn out. So hunters and gun owners, for example, one of the reasons why they don't turn out to the polls is because they're nervous about the security of the election, that they feel like their vote might be stolen or it might be rigged. And so in situations where they do have these precautions in place, I think that only helps conservatives, especially as we know that these groups are worried about such things.
Yeah.
And even more so, I think that, I've spoken to former RNC officials who have told me that they really think that what they've done with the poll watchers and having lawyers on call in these different states who are really familiar with the state laws and can kind of call out BS as it happens and be ready to file these lawsuits are something that's really going to benefit this time around. And these are people who I think are pretty sober-minded about these things and, maybe not particularly flattering when talking to the RNC. And so I think that's definitely something to be watched that might be beneficial to conservatives this time around.
It would be a big deal if they can make sure that people have credibility, believe these elections. That, by the way, that survey was Gallup. It was released on Thursday of last week. 84% of respondents say they favor photo ID. 83% support providing proof of citizenship when registering to vote for the first time. That would be the SAVE Act. That's what House Republicans were advancing. The rest of the respondents, they favor stealing elections. Hey, thank you so much. Reagan Reese, really appreciate your time today, as always.